Hello, it's me, EternalOpossum. After slaying the dragon of bad takes with the help of my good friend Cording and a healthy case of 2x Machina, as well as managing to live down the effects of the fact I nearly ended the world with my bad takes, I came back. Oh yeah, I also became an actual opossum without an office, so that's nice. It's time once again for another Hell's Kitchen countdown video, and this is a video that I personally always wanted to make. Whenever I look around Hell's Kitchen discussions, I usually see people discussing favorite chefs, but never favorite seasons. Maybe it's because more hardcore fans tend to flock to this show to see good cooking angry British man, but I feel that talking about the quality of the show's seasons is more interesting to me than ranking the winners. The reason is because more often than not, you'll get some wildly different opinions on what makes a good season. It can range from a solid cast to entertainment value to the quality of the winner. There's a lot of what makes a season a good season. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be ranking every Hell's Kitchen season overall, and I'll be ranking them just like how I rank my top 21 favorite winners. Now, before I start this countdown, I need to start by mentioning everyone's favorite bit rules. Yeah, this shouldn't be too long. For starters, yes, we are only counting the 21 seasons based in America. I don't have access to the other international seasons, and let's be honest, that's over 30 seasons worth of show. That's a bit too much to talk about for this video, and if I did include, I'd be dead by the time we got halfway through. Second, I am aware there is a new season that's going to be coming out this year, but I'm not going to talk about it here because by the time we'll finish airing, it'll already be next year. It'll get its own video and own rank on where I would put it at some point in the future, but until then, it's out of here. Final disclaimer, I pretty much ranked all these seasons based on a personal taste of mine, and considering how well my top 21 winners list was, I feel like I should go into detail on what makes a season good to me. A good season contains a cast I like, great entertainment value whether it be from drama or funny moments, if I like the winner, and more minor things such as the cast talent level from a technical standpoint, if I enjoyed Ramsey this season, if I think the challenges or service are memorable or interesting to me, stuff like that. That's just to give an idea of what I'm looking for in a season. Well, it's time to stop being around the bush because we have some seasons to rank. Hell's Kitchen premiered on May 30th, 2005 on Fox. Throughout its long run, it's seen many ups and many downs, from all-time iconic and borderline mimetic moments to absolutely unwatchable moments that make you question why one would even watch this show. The reason I bring its long run up is because many long-running shows have had their seasonal run, from Family Guy to The Simpsons to The Walking Dead. Any show that runs longer than 6 or so more years is going to have at least one season that stands out being absolute shit, or at the very least not as good as its predecessors, and Hell's Kitchen is no exception. From seasons that drag for ages to seasons having winners that fans believe shouldn't have won, what I personally believe makes a season truly the worst is when there's no point room for anyone there. Trust me, I had more than a few picks for the Bottles list. 4 others to be precise. However, what makes those seasons win out for me is the fact that I can, at the very least, have a few positives to say about them. Season 16 is so far the first and only season where I have absolutely nothing good to say about it. Okay, that's a lie. I actually really like the intro for this season because it calls back to season 4's. Although that pretty much reminds me I could be watching an infinitely better season. And that's it. That's all the positives. That bar isn't looking very high right now. So, let's run down the list of why this season sucks eggs. Starting off, I feel this is the season where it seemed like the show was really running out of ideas for challenges, as stuff like the Grand Prix challenge felt like something out of the Amazing Race. Don't get me wrong, I like the Amazing Race, but I do think it is a sign that the show is kind of struggling and trying to think of new challenges. Speaking of challenges, this season also introduced the Black Jacket Challenge, where instead of just being good service, chefs must survive elimination challenges in order to get a Black Jacket. Now, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I don't hate the idea of this challenge or elimination challenges in general. I think it gives more of an emphasis on who truly is cut out for being a head chef via creativity, and gives a reason for a challenge to have importance rather than just rewards. The problem is that more often than not, chefs who are considered frontrunners by fans will get screwed over in these challenges, just for the sake of keeping more dramatic chefs around. And trust me, later seasons will do this a lot. Okay, the chef eliminated here isn't exactly loved, but considering they were considered a major frontrunner of the season, I think it still counts. Of course, there's my biggest gripe of the season, and that's the cast. Now, everyone who's watched the season at least once has taken note of how unlikable the blue team is. From sexists to cheaters to actual racists, this season's blue team is what would happen if you took some of the most insufferable people in the world and put them on a team. Or you just do Hell's Kitchen Blizzard Edition and get a similar result. However, while everyone talks about how awful the blue team is, no one ever really talks about the red team. And the reason for that is, what is there to talk about with them? They're seriously one of the blandest teams in the show's history. We're talking white bread levels of bland. When the only two chefs I immediately remember are Gia and Heather, and that's because they actually did something at least marginally interesting, then there's a problem. Everyone else either goes out too early to do anything of note, or is so bare bones that I barely remember anything about them. By the top 10, the only chef I was actively rooting for was Devin, and it's only because he wasn't as bland or unlikable as the other chefs. And he's still bland as hell. Seriously, it got to the point I was trying to find someone to root for, which just really speaks to how unlikable this season is. Of course, I gotta talk about the winner, Ryan, and she just doesn't do anything that memorable. Seriously, I watched each season again to get a fresh look at it, and even after a rewatch of this goddamn season, I could not remember anything noble she did. You guys want to talk about how Holly or Janelle are memorable? At least Holly was the winner that no one expected, and Janelle's noble because, well, I'll let you figure that one out. Season 16 is a season that's low on ideas, kickstart the Elimination Challenge trend, and pretty much has two teams with one being insufferable and the other being bland as hell. Needless to say, it's not a season I'm watching again. Except for its intro. That was pretty good. As much as a lot of people would like to disagree, Hell's Kitchen is driven on personalities. Like, a lot of it. In fact, one of the main reasons the show is so liked is because, unlike a lot of other reality shows, whenever the contestants are dicks to one another, they are called out on it and punished. Now, granted, this isn't always the case, but let's face it, there are a lot of strong personalities. So, it would only make sense for there to be a return season. Enter All Stars. So, Season 17, commonly referred to as Hell's Kitchen All Stars, is an interesting season to me. A lot, and I mean a lot of people, really hate this season, and often put it at the bottom of their favorite seasons list. Hell, for a while I was under the impression this season was also going to be my least favorite. However, after rewatching it, this season just makes me sad because it had so much potential. I love the idea of an all-star season. Hell, the easiest way to get me invested in an episode or season is to feature returning chefs. Whenever returning chefs show up, they could have gained cooking skill, lost cooking skill, were more pleasant, etc. I always love seeing returning chefs not just for nostalgia purposes, but to see how they grew from their time on the show and watch as they apply to their second time around. This is something I think Season 10's runner-up service did amazingly. It actually got me invested in the idea of a Russell and Virginia return. How crazy is that? Not only that, there are these narratives that I don't hate in concept. I like the idea of a Robin redemption arc considering how she was in Season 10, and I do like the idea of Michelle winning because she is the underdog of the season. Additionally, I don't think the season started off that badly. I think that it was good for the first few episodes. So, it's really sad that by the halfway point, the season went from being a potential god tier season to absolutely terrible. However, pretty much everyone has talked about what they don't like about the season, so talking about it here would be kind of redundant, which is why I'm going to compare it to another All-Star season that actually suffers from many of the same problems. Total Drama All-Stars. Let's see, a season of All-Stars with some cast members sticking out like a sore thumb? Check. Those cast members not really doing anything of real note before getting eliminated? Check. Drama that absolutely butchers beloved competitors? Check. A divisive winner? Check. A bunch of controversial eliminations? Check. One elimination in particular being the biggest nail in the coffin for the season because they were doing so good and they went out in such an insulting way that it doomed the season? Check. Yeah, this season is pretty much on the same level as the worst season of Total Drama. How do you botch a season that badly? That's not even to mention the other problems I have this season. The fact the new intro is really boring and has that awful guitar riff song. The fact this season pretty much amplified the hatred for elimination challenges with the booing of Giovanni and Jennifer. The fact that everyone from season 15 ends up being so bad that it shows the weaknesses of that season. The fact the majority of season 14 chefs were either not as good as they were previously, or they took a massive jump in asshole quality. The fact that the season tries to push the narrative of the youngest being the winner at the cost of them screwing over more deserving chefs. The fact this season reeks of drama over logic, which pretty much means that if one chef is going to look like a frontrunner, then screw you! They're getting eliminated because they're not getting the shower matches with Elise. The only, and I mean only reason this season isn't the worst is because I can see the potential in this season, and I don't think it started badly. But by the end, it ended in one of the most botched ways imaginable. And that just makes me sad. Okay, what I said about there not being much of a discussion of what the best season is kind of a lie. There have been discussions on which season is the best, and more specifically, when was the best time to watch Hell's Kitchen when it comes to their eras. Seasons 1 through 3 are considered the early age of Hell's Kitchen, and seasons 4, 5, 6, and to some people 7 are considered the golden age. After that, however, is where Hell's Kitchen started to dip a bit in terms of quality. Instead of balance and drama of legit talent, the season supports drama over talent. Granted, there are a few chefs that are legitimately god tier in that talent area, and I don't hate those seasons for the most part with one exception because I did get some entertainment value out of them. However, my limit was finally broken when I watched season 11. You know the term, everything is bigger in Texas? Well, season 11 took that term so far, it gave me IBS. Let's get the positives out of the way. John and Anthony are easily some of my all-time favorite chefs, with the latter being in my top 10, and Mary had one of the best redemptions in the show's history. There's also the Final 5 service with the returning winners, which is easily one of my all-time favorite services. There's also Judge Martin Yan, who's easily my favorite guest judge. And that's about it. Yeah, I have a lot of problems with this season, and they can all be boiled down to 3 major issues. The first problems are the storylines. There are these narratives that are brought up at one point, but then pretty much are forgotten about just as quickly. There was going to be something with Gina and Nedra, and then Gina quit, a feud between Dan and Ray was started, and Dan got eliminated, and Zach took his place as Ray's rival. A feud between Zach and Mary was teased, and it was barely brought up. John overcoming the odds and winning? Yeah, it didn't happen. I know a part of it may be because Ramsey eliminated them before the narrative could really get its wheels going, but if that's the case, why bring it up at all? Dan in particular, I think, was a super missed opportunity to keep some consistent drama going, considering he is more unlikable in my opinion than someone like Zach, and I think you could push him further realistically. But nope, didn't happen. Just like the winner of the season Janelle receiving her prize. More on that later. Then there's the blue team that lose challenges in service so many times that the only times they actually manage to avoid losing people is when the other team messes up badly. And even then they still lose people. You know how some cartoon episodes will just have this one joke repeated ad nauseum to the extent it stops being funny and just gets growing inducing? Yeah, this is what it's like. Now take that one joke and stretch it out to over half the season. And that leads into my biggest problem this season. Its size. I know this season contains 20 chefs, so already there's going to be a lot of episodes. And I wouldn't have a problem with this if the cliffhangers weren't as numerous. There are so many cliffhangers in this season that feels more backed up than I am after eating at Taco Bell. Don't believe me? Well, going back over the season, this season has 22 episodes, making it the longest of any season, and in its 22 episode run, 10 of those episodes end on those cliffhangers. That's nearly half the season. Not only that, but there are 4 two-parters, which include the finale, and 1 3-parter that takes 2 challenges and 2 services to eliminate one of the weakest black jackets in the series. And after all that, watching the longest season in the show's history, the winner doesn't even get the job. That essentially means that at the end of the day, this season is a complete waste of time. And I know there's other seasons where the chef didn't get their job, but hey, those seasons were at least entertaining. at least Michelle actually got the job, meaning that yes, All Stars is less of a waste of time. There are little things I do like, but man, I never wanted a season to end this badly. It was one of the most painful seasons I've ever watched, and it's only the third worst. I'll be honest, I have a really difficult time getting into the later seasons of Hell's Kitchen. Sure, while they may be more talented than previous seasons, or at least to some extent, they don't reach the same heights as the older seasons entertainment-wise. They're not bad seasons by any stretch of the means for the most part, but they're honestly seasons that I don't have any strong attachment towards for one reason or another. Then again, looking back on the seasons, I think I much prefer doing its own thing rather than trying to recapture its glory. Because then we get season 15. If there was ever a season that I felt was trying too hard to be like the early seasons, it was season 15. Seriously, we got the relatively mediocre cast with some action decent chefs on top of a lot of drama, so theoretically it should work, right? However, where those early seasons tend to succeed is the fact the cast is at least generally likable. Season 15's cast has ranged from really okay to just outright terrible. Easily the two worst examples of this come from Jackie and Frank. Jackie I'm going to be a bit more lenient on because as much as she's, well, terrible, she can actually be kind of funny on occasion. I still do get some laughs out of some of her confessionals, as well as the fact the season just actively shits on her to the extent it's hilarious, and it also helps to humble her a bit. But the same cannot be said for Frank. Oh no. Now, I'm just going to say that there's very little chefs I outright hate. Hell, I can only name like 5, and it's mainly because for the most part I can confirm they're pieces of shit in real life, and Frank is most certainly one of them. If you don't know why, then why are you watching this video first of all? Just watch his elimination comment and you'll see. Oh yeah, and Ariel, the winner. Yeah, I don't really like her that much. Actually, come to think of it, I don't think the season itself liked her, which is why her victory reveal was super lackluster in my opinion. Another problem are the eliminations this season, which, while not rivaling All-Stars in terms of terrible, are still pretty bad. And the worst part is that the majority of these terrible eliminations happen to chefs that are relatively likable. From Eddie, to Hassan, to Chad, to Joe. By the Black Jacket portion, I was really only rooting for Jared, and even then I knew he wasn't going to win. However, there are enough positives that keep it out of the bottom 3 spot. Well, there's only 2, but they take up a good chunk of the season. First are the challenges, which I actually think are some of the strongest of the series. They're goofy, but they're a fun type of goofy, like the dumpling challenge and even the blind taste test. However, my favorite is easily the jacket challenge. It's just such an interesting spin on the whole communication challenge that when it popped up again in season 20, I was so happy. The big highlight, however, is obviously sous chef Christina. Now, I love returning chefs, obviously, but Christina just knocked it out of the park as a debutant sous chef. She really showed what she was all about, being tough but also fair at the same time. There's also this quote.
She only won because I lost. That's not a winner.
Aside from that, however, this season feels like it's trying way too hard to be a better season. As a result, comes off as one of the show's worst. As I mentioned earlier, after the golden age of Hell's Kitchen, the show started to really dip in terms of quality. Gone was a solid balance between drama and talent, and in its place was a bunch of seasons where the drama overshadowed the talent. Down to that, a good chunk of those seasons' cast were really not that much to write home about. Aside from a few exceptions, their cast were really just eh. I do think that season 11 is the worst when it comes to this based on sheer size alone, but I think the best example of this change was season 8. I like to say that I have a pretty high tolerance for awful, but man, season 8 was just really fucking bad. So season 8 marks the start of Hell's Kitchen's dark age, where the show just went for a bunch of seasons with a lot of drama but not much talent. And of course, this season is probably the worst example of this. Now, I'm aware that the early and golden age seasons, as much as they're popular, they're not the most talented. But at the very least, they contain chefs that are pretty damn good for the most part. Season 8's cast is the first season that the first time I watched around, I saw absolutely no potential in anyone. Okay, that's a lie. I thought there was some potential in someone like Louis due to him coming off as a leader, and Gale due to not falling into infighting. But even then, I had to really look to even find it. Jillian, I guess, would also count, even though I didn't really care that much for her. And Russell, well, I'll get to him. Everyone else either was pretty obviously awful, and if someone did display some level of competence, it was dumbed down by a pretty major flaw. More often than not, those flaws were personality related. I know that personality is something that a lot of people scoff at and say it shouldn't matter in elimination, but I mean, Ramsey's reason for booing Sabrina was because she just couldn't stop throwing people under the bus, and you could argue that Russell lost the finale because he had made so many enemies and didn't help his case with his terrible attitude. That also segues into what I think about the cast itself from a personality standpoint, and this was the first cast I felt nothing but indifference for. No one really stood out to me for the most part for the better, and even the chefs I felt at least a bit of positivity for, they were eliminated pretty early in the competition. Not only that, but they also made one of the worst changes in the show's history. Getting rid of JP. Okay, yeah, he was busy doing other stuff, and one thing I forgot to mention as a positive for Season 11 was JP coming back, but who they replace him with is the equivalent of just casting the blandest, most boring person for a lead role in the film. He's essentially generic guy, maitre d'. It actually got so bad that I wanted to stop watching the season the first time around. And yet, I could actually find a few highlights. The first is the final 8 episode. I legitimately think it's a good episode due to all of Trev's antics. I don't like him in this season, but I think that if we just saw more of this side of Trev, then I'd be a bigger fan of him. The other is just Ramsey in general. He has a lot of great quotes in here. Gandhi's flip-flop, falling on the fat crack, him blowing up at Boris's impression of him, pranking Rob. I'd actually say this is one of his best seasons from an entertainment standpoint alone. Of course, there's one other thing I'm missing. One particular chef. A chef who's pretty much legendary among the community. That chef is Raj. When you really get down to it, he's the perfect representation of the season. Completely there for drama, no skill whatsoever. However, I just can't help but love this fucking lunatic. He's the sole reason I come back to this season, and everything after that just cannot compare. He's like a train painted with a bunch of big bulbous penises derailing and crashing into a building. Logically, it should be awful because, you know, a train's being derailed. Who's on that fucking train? But at the same time, it catches your eye because of all the willies on there. And if you're like me and have no sense of humor, you're laughing because you just can't believe what you're seeing. Still doesn't make up for how shit the season is, though. Unlikable and untalented cast with a just as unlikable and untalented winner. Okay, maybe not unlikable, but untalented? Absolutely. You know, if there's one thing I've come to expect with these types of ranking videos, is that my opinions on certain things will usually never be set in stone until I really put my mind to it. There's actually quite a few seasons I legitimately had to think about if I liked as much as I thought I did, or if I hated as much as I thought I did. And then there's those seasons that, while I don't find phenomenal, I can't tell if I outright hate or have a bit of a soft spot for. That's why we have the rewatches though, so I can accurately nail down my thoughts on the season instead of just going off of memory. And I think the best season this could apply to is Season 2. I think out of every season on this list, Season 2 was easily the hardest one to nail down a definitive ranking for. The reason is because for me, this season's downsides aren't as bad as something like Season 8's, and I do think this season's highs are just a little bit better. Hell, for a while I actually thought I was too harsh on Season 2 in my original review of it. Once again, that's what I did the rewatches for, and after rewatching Season 2, I think my thoughts on that review still stand. Season 2 is, in my opinion, where the show first started to build its identity, scrapping its documentary style and goal of turning a person off the street into a head chef and fit for what we all know and love. Season 2 of Hell's Kitchen feels like a really wonky first step. With the cast, you expect it to be at least better than the contestants who are professionally trained, but no. Somehow, even with a cast of actually trained chefs, this season's talent is arguably even worse than Season 1's. At least Season 1 had some legitimate talent for the most part. Speaking of the cast, I don't really have that much to say about them. They're just a really cast. I mean, I do like Heather and Rachel, and Keith was fine as well. I guess I like Giacomo for the brief time he stayed around. Virginia's nice, I guess. Yeah, I have to really stretch when it comes to reasons to recommend this season. Actually, that's the big thing I want to mention with Season 2. My main two upsides for this season, those being Heather and Gordon. The reason why I'm drawing attention to this is because while they're both upsides, they also have some pretty notable drawbacks. I'll start with Heather, since her drawback is the least egregious. And I wouldn't really say it's her fault. Now, if you don't remember, I ranked Heather number 9 in my top 21 favorite winners, and my thoughts on her are still the same. I think she is a likable and deserving winner who fought her way to the top. Yet, one thing I failed to mention is that Heather winning was kind of predictable. Let's be honest, for the moment she was switched with Polly to be the kitchen donkey, you kinda had that feeling she was going to win. That makes the suspense of who's going to win kind of non-existent. Then there's Gordon, and once more, my opinion of him this season I still stand by. This season is among his most iconic. I mean, we got Yankee Danky Dual Shite, Non-Stick Pan, Where's the Lamb Sauce? I mean, there's a reason why this season tends to be brought up quite a bit when it comes to Gordon's best. We even got the original Utterance of Donkey. The only thing is that it comes at a cost, a high cost at that. And of course that means I have to bring up Virginia. Now, Virginia has a reputation among fans as being the absolute worst finalist in the show's history due to her awful performances in the kitchen and only getting as far as she did due to a lot of lucky breaks. Or a more blunt term, because Gordon had a hard on for her. Granted, the uncut services that came out definitely gave more of an insight into how she made the final two, but the hatred still existed. Personally, I'm mixed on Virginia. As I mentioned earlier, I think she's nice, like she isn't unlikable by any stretch of the means. And let's face it, the cast this season was really shit. And since Virginia was at the very least strong in challenges, she was pretty much bound to make the Black Jackets either way. On the other hand, yeah, she's a really shit finalist still, and I personally would have been fine had she been eliminated at the final 4. Maybe we'll prevent her from being more hated? The point is that with all of those positives, there's at least one pretty notable drawback. Heather being an obvious winner, and Ramsey keeping Virginia around for that long, even if the uncut services showed why she made it as far as she did. All that just causes Season 2 to suffer a lot, and yet, it at the very least ends with a deserving winner. So that's something it has going for it at least. Well, it's official. We're finally out of the D tier zone. The past few seasons I've just talked about are seasons that, for all intents and purposes, are seasons that I don't really think are very good. However, just because we're out of the trash in Season 16 tier, that doesn't mean I'm going to be all sunshine and rainbows from here on out, because the next few seasons are seasons that generally underwhelm for one reason or another, ranging from a bland cast to uninteresting drama, to really not that much standing out for me. They're just above those previously mentioned seasons because I felt that these ones are a lesser evil to watch, even if some of the others I mentioned have more positives overall. And why don't we start with our first gimmick season. I'm not gonna lie, Season 20 is probably the season I have the least to say about. I don't know, I think it's because I really struggled on finding anything really that noble when it comes to Young Guns. I couldn't find anything really bad, but at the same time, I couldn't really find anything that interesting. I don't really find the cast that fascinating, even with the whole gimmick of them being young. I mean, I like Steve, Megan, Trenton, and Sam. It's nice that they're relatively drama-free, and hell, the most drama you'll get is from Alex, Josie, or Bryn. The only thing is that with a season that's this drama-free, that means that'll be pretty damn boring for the most part. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the first 3 episodes with the museum opening, Matthew just being so horribly out of his league, and then Chicken Gate, but I don't know, right after that the season just kind of spins its wheels. Again, there are moments like Steve's plead and Antonio's redemption, but for the most part, I just really struggle to find anything that memorable. Easily the best part about the season to me is Trenton winning, finally breaking a streak that should have ended in All-Stars and Season 19, but we'll get to that in a moment. Anyways, Young Guns, despite being really drama-free, ended up being a pretty mediocre season in my eyes. You know, I try my best to be as unbiased as possible when it comes to these countdowns. I want to at least have a legitimate reason for why I feel one way or another about a season, and the season I'm about to talk about is easily the season I had the hardest time writing about. The reason is because, for the most part, it was just me going on a nostalgia critic-esque rant about how bad this season is without really mentioning any of its positives. Granted, I still don't think this season has that many positives, but I feel I should do it without any sort of fake or exaggerated anger in mind. That being said, I don't think Season 14 is very good. I just want to start off by saying that I don't hate Season 14. Not in the slightest. I think it's a completely inoffensive season as is. But to be honest, well, let me go into some detail. So Season 14 is pretty much one of the fan favorite seasons of Hell's Kitchen. Like, it's up there with Season 6 as one of the most beloved in the show's history. And I just don't get it. I really don't understand what's so special about this season. I mean, okay, the cast is really strong, which is something I can admit, and it's probably the reason why this season has the most returnees out of every other season. Outside of that, however, I just don't get it. I don't really find the cast that interesting, I don't find the services that memorable, I don't even find the challenges that interesting. Hell, I don't even think Ramsey is that fun to watch this season. The first time I watched this, I went into expecting something truly amazing, like actually wild. I was expecting something like an actual fist fight to break out, but what I got was just Season 14. Again, it's not bad, but I just don't see anything that watchable about it. I mean, I guess Randy and Allison are fine, but not phenomenal, and I guess despite my thoughts on Megan being pretty obvious, even I have to admit that her storyline is pretty good. Again, I have to reiterate, I don't think this season is bad by any stretch of the means, but I really don't think it's anywhere near the top of best seasons. From a talent perspective, yeah, but then again, that's because I can't really argue with it. Overall, it's just a really mediocre season to me. That's really it. I'm just going to say this right now, Season 14 and the season I'm just about to talk about, I honestly think could be completely interchangeable with each other. I pretty much think they're on the same level as each other in terms of overall enjoyment. Season 14 has its pros and cons, and this season also has its pros and cons. Admittedly, if it came down to which one I would rather watch, I would choose this one, but honestly, I don't think it's by much. So, remember when I did my favorite chefs and I went for a rapid fire list of just naming off winners I had pretty much no opinion of? Yeah, this season is just that whole segment, but as a season. Season 13 is a season that I don't think is necessarily bad, but at the same time, I don't think it's one I find exceptional by any means. I think a lot of that comes from how much of a slog the first half of the season is. I know that some seasons of Hell's Kitchen have these streaks of episodes where it feels like it's spinning its wheels for the most part, just trying to get rid of the fodder before getting to the main stuff. But some of those seasons at least have those chefs be somewhat entertaining. Season 13's first 6 boots are so unbearably boring that I barely remember their names half the time. And even after those boots are gone and the drama starts to ramp up a bit, I don't think it's enough to really save this season. I mean, okay, we have Frank's elimination episode, which I think is my favorite episode of the season. We have Sunday's underdog story, and Jennifer, and to an extent Brian, handling some of the drama portion, Natasha being a solid way to balance it all out, and of course Maria's first time as Maitre D'. But I just don't think it's enough to really invest me when a large portion of the season is just so uninteresting. However, the main reason why this season gets a little bit better than Season 14 is just because of one chef, Sterling. Sterling is easily the highlight of the season, being just a lovable and wholesome goofball that you can't really hate. Do I think he went at the right time? Yeah, I think he did, and I know he wasn't getting Black Jacket. But I still think he alone was better than anything I saw in Season 14. Am I probably going to be killed for this? Probably, but I'll die on this hill. But yeah, outside of Sterling and the increase of quality later on, I don't think this season is that special. It's a little bit better than Season 14 due to the factors I just mentioned, but that's like saying this bowl of ice cream is better because it has sprinkles. So, if you don't remember, one of the criteria for what makes a good season to me is a cast I genuinely like. They can contain chefs that are either funny, heartwarming, have awesome moments, that sort of thing. Of course, with that sort of thing, there needs to be at least some chefs that I can at least love for me to really enjoy the season. That didn't really happen with this season coming up. So, I'm just gonna say that the stars aligned for this one, because at the moment of this video going up, Hell's Kitchen has just released clips of the season, which gave me a fresh view for it, which is something that I'm going to greatly appreciate. I think that one of the best things I can say about the season is just the cast. We got a lot of likable chefs here like Christina, Justin, Brian, Clemenza, and even relatively early boots like Patrick, Roshni, and Danielle I'd say are pretty likable. I also do think the first episode is fun with Tavon, the true winner, just bombing in service, Justin Gogol to get the first perfect score in the blind taste test, Barbie herself being one of the most underrated personalities in my opinion for sarcastic confessionals, and of course this being the star of Christina Wilson, which of course is going to get a few points in my book, even if I don't think she's that memorable in the season. At the same time, however, I kind of find this season a bit of a chore to sit through, mainly because of two things. The first is the whole terrible trio of Robin, Kimmy, and Tiffany, and the three of them are just so horrid to Barbie in particular and towards the competition that they cross the line from being enjoyable villains to insufferable assholes. Add on to the fact that while I do like the cast, I don't particularly love them, and that really doesn't help. The other issue I have is with the padding this season. It's admittedly nowhere near as bad as season 11's, but this is a season that nowadays will only take around 16 episodes minimum to complete. It's clear that looking back, they were really trying to stretch out this season, and I think that's another reason why the season suffers. Overall, I don't really hate the season, but at the same time, I don't particularly care for it. If we were just a little bit sure that maybe the season could squeak its way into the top 10, but as it stands, it's just season 10. I started watching Hell's Kitchen around the time the lockdown in my state was coming close to an end, and I decided in my infinite wisdom that in order to celebrate the occasion, to start binging a brand new series. Me and my mom had already gone through shows like Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead up to that point, but we needed something new, something different. It was then I decided to zero in on a show that I had briefly taken a few looks at back then in 2017, but never really gone out of my way to watch it. Here's an I made back then that confirms it. Needless to say, I was pretty damn behind on Hell's Kitchen when I first started interacting with the community. Like, I hadn't even started season 10 yet. So when a new season came around, I was quite excited. So season 21, or Battle of the Ages, is interesting because it's the first season that I actually watched as it was airing. I formed most of my opinions on the season as it aired, and until the episodes are released on YouTube, this will probably be my thoughts for a while. If I get anything wrong, chalk it up to me not remembering much about it. Anyway, this season. It's fine. Yeah, for a first live watch season, I felt pretty indifferent to this season as a whole, despite the concept of Battle of the Ages being one I actually do kind of enjoy. Don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff this season like Summer's Redemption Arc, the Final 9 service, the double elimination at the Final 14, which I actually thought was pretty surprising, and chefs like Sakari, Cheyenne, and especially Alex being true highlights of the season. Hell, Alex in particular I think carries a lot of the season. My gripes with the season come in two forms. First is this weird thing I noticed where it seemed like a lot of the younger chefs seemed to dodge a pretty hefty number of bullets early on. Like, I feel there were times where I felt one of the younger chefs could go earlier, like Alyssa over Nicole or Ileana over Mindy. As such, it kind of creates a pretty obvious storyline where Alex is going to rise to the top against all odds and be the only 40-something left standing, and then he's going to win it all. The second is just, I don't really find it that interesting. I don't really find the stuff with Tara that engaging, and the few times I did feel genuinely engaged with the season, like with the stuff with Amy, it just ended off screen, which I feel was a big waste of an opportunity. I know it's reality TV, you can't really plan much, but if the stuff were to end, then show what happened. What, were they in the bathroom with this conversation where they made up happened? Either way, the season's pretty much fine. I will prefer the more interesting cast, but I've kind of accepted that it seems really difficult nowadays. Oh wait. Finally, we've officially made it to the top 10, and I'm happy to say that we only have this season to go before we get to the seasons that I like. I do find it interesting that this is structured almost exactly like my Toy Wall Winners list, with only 9 seasons I can say I genuinely like, and only a few minor differences. Anyways, number 10. Let's go. Season 7 is the first season being talked about here that is part of what's known as Hell's Kitchen's Golden Age I mentioned earlier. However, Season 7 is also one of those seasons that are kind of one of those gray areas when it comes to seasons, because some people think it's a genuinely great season, while others think it's just fine. Personally, I'm in the latter category. Sure, it's got some strong moments like the opening night completion, Andrew's quit, Scott the Chump, and of course Hurricane Milka. But really, I think those moments are few and far in between, and I think the good moments get more and more sparse the further the season goes. By the time the Black Jackets roll around, I think really the only two things keeping me around are Autumn and Jay. Speaking of which, as much as Holly is a genuinely unexpected and deserving winner, and I think it's still a real shame on what happened to her, I still don't think she's very memorable. I don't think it's to the level of someone like Ryan or Janelle, but I would be lying if I could name at least two things Holly did that didn't involve her winning or her interactions with Jay. Overall, season 7 I wouldn't consider a bad season, but I wouldn't consider it really good. It's got its high points and standout moments, but in the end, it's just a very okay season. Something I mentioned back when I talked about season 11 was something known as Hell's Kitchen's Dark Age, where talented drama was considerably unbalanced. The drama was heavily emphasized, while the talent was considerably lower, with several awful contestants being among some of the most untalented chefs to ever grace the show. Some people say that season 8 is probably the best example of this, and while I do personally agree, this season coming up I definitely see be thrown into the mix. You know, from what I heard about this season before watching it, I had a suspicion that I wouldn't rank this season in my top 10, let alone near it at all. But I sat down, I watched it, and personally, I kind of enjoy it. I think a lot of it comes down to the cast, in particular the blue team. The blue team in this season is easily one of my all-time favorites, with a combination of Paul, Will, Natalie, and Tommy making way for some of my favorite moments in the show. I still go on my way, for example, to look up the whole grape punishment, because I just love that moment so much. Add on to the fact that two of them are in the finals, and I end up with a final two that I want to see win equally. Do they win a bit in likability? A little bit, yeah, and it's due to the final 5 stuff. And of course, this is where I finally get to talk about someone that I think I've gone too long without talking about as a Hell's Kitchen channel. We're talking about Elise. And personally, I'm mixed on her. On one hand, yeah, I can definitely see why people don't like her. She's loud, she's obnoxious, she never takes accountability for her actions, the stuff with Carrie goes on for way too long for my liking, and she did not deserve 3rd place. I would have been completely fine with her being eliminated 5th considering how fitting it would be, and I don't think it would change too much. In fact, I think it would have made the Final 4 more likable considering that Jennifer would be there. On the other hand, I think her jerkishness has this sort of weird effect where it's so over the top and in your face that it goes from being insufferable to almost comical on occasion. And at times where she does get called out for her shit, like with Jennifer in the final 8, it's extremely cathartic. Not only that, but personally, I think she's really the only memorable part about that red team. As much as I love Jennifer, she didn't really stand out a whole lot until the final 8, and Natalie spent the majority of her time on the blue team, so really, Elise is the only option. Plus, I personally dislike Cheeto more, mainly because he's not a funny dick, more like a dick. So yeah, I do like this season a lot. Sure, it's got a few problems, like Elise making it further than she really should have, but overall, I think when it comes to the seasons in Hell's Kitchen's Dark Age, this is the only one I can say I actually enjoyed. Earlier in this video, I said that one of the things that would make a good season to me is a winner I like. In terms of importance, I would say it's the second most important bit. You can have some really good talent and be entertaining for the most part, but if the winner is a chef I either dislike or don't really care about that much, then I won't feel as tempted to watch the season, even if I consider it good overall. I don't think a season that has given me such high hopes but let me down so hard since season 19. Okay, it's nowhere near as bad as All Stars, but man, this season just disappointed me in the end. The season already started out with a bang with eliminating someone before the first service, and throughout the season, there were all these narratives that I was genuinely invested in. Mark's rivalry with the blue team, Amber constantly making herself look like a fool and pretty much screwing her up her own chances of winning, the Cody Lou stuff which I actually found tolerable, and there were other chefs I liked just for the fact I liked them, like Cyan, Adam, and of course Declan. However, my favorite was easily Nikki's underdog story. She reminded me so much of Julia from season 3, and if you don't remember, Julia was one of my all-time favorite chefs and my favorite underdog at one point. Nikki, however, completely stole that spot. Of course, one of the things that made some people sour on this season are some of the eliminations. There's Adams, which, while I don't think he should have gone there, I'm personally not as bothered as I should be, especially since it led to Mark's amazing elimination the following night. Then there's Nikki's, and yeah, it sucks she didn't make the Black Jackets when she really should have, but it's mitigated by how bittersweet it is, and hey, I still had Cody and Declan to root for. But unfortunately, the final free tasting challenge reared its ugly head once more and completely ruined the season by eliminating Declan, even when in all honesty, he should have won. Instead it would be Corey who would win, and like I said in my favorite winners list, she's fine, but she's really nothing that special. And the thing is that I can't say I didn't enjoy the season, which I did. I really do think it's a good season with all the neat drama and pretty good moments. Hell, the Cook for Your Life challenge doesn't actually rob anyone this time. It's just that one decision to eliminate Declan absolutely ruined it for me. If he won the season, then I'd have no problem putting this season in my top 5. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Also, the season pretty much did away with intro, so that causes it to suffer more. So, a little fun fact, one thing I wanted to do before this video came out was actually do individual reviews for all the seasons. I think it would have been pretty fun to do them, and they wouldn't be that taxing since they were only 3-minute videos I could bust out pretty quickly. I only made 3 of them, and the fact I mentioned them right now should not only show that I'm running out of ideas on how to segue into the next season, but also what the next season is possibly going to be. Season 1 is interesting because it's the most un-Hell's Kitchen season of Hell's Kitchen. What I mean by that is that a lot of stuff you would see in the more modern seasons, like eliminations from other teams, other chefs being called down in lieu of others, both teams losing, even the way the winner was decided, all of that was either absent or completely different in this season. Not only that, the overall format and goal of the season was different as well. The goal of this season was to take someone with very little experience, which explains the weak talent of the season, and pretty much mold them into a head chef, with the prize being their very own restaurant. Honestly, I kinda like that idea. I think it makes it a bit easier to relate to the cast since I highly doubt the majority audience makes up of professional chefs, even though the cast is, for the most part, kinda forgettable. Really, there's only like a few chefs that are kind of memorable, although I think it's because it's the first season and if you're watching them in order, then they may not stick out as much. As for Ramsay this season, I pretty much live by the idea that a lot of people got to watch in Hell's Kitchen just because of Gordon, and the season has Gordon at perhaps his most harsh. Granny has his nice moments throughout the season, but it takes until Black Jackets to reach that point. While I do like harsh Ramsay, I do think that he's still a bit awkward in front of the camera, so while the insults might sting a bit more, they still feel kind of stilted to me. Hell, the only really memorable moment where he got mad was when Jeff mouthed off to him. Regardless, a lot of the stuff I just said were more along the lines of nitpicks, because if you can't tell, I think this is a solid season. I do like the cast decently enough despite how bland they are, with Dewberry being decently funny, Andrew having a small redemption arc, Jeff's like call it quit, Elsie being the first fan favorite of the show, and Ralph and Michael being an honestly underrated final 2 for our first season. Granted, that may come down to the fact that both of them are actual chefs, but for their talent level, they were really good. Of course, my favorite part of this season is just the documentary style it's going for. It just feels so unique and special to this season that it honestly feels like a one-of-a-kind. What can I say? It may have not aged that well, but for what this season is, I think it's pretty good. Hell's Kitchen seasons I consider to have somewhat of a magic number when it comes to episode counts, and the show itself somewhat experimented with them throughout the years it's been around. Seasons 1 through 3 had 11 episodes, which infuriates me because why isn't it an odd number? Seasons 4 through 8 had 15, which is a decent enough step in the right direction. Season 9 had 16, which eventually became the show's default episode count for seasons. Season 10 had 20, and 11 had 20 freaking 2, because God forbid we make that season any less of a slog. If you can't tell, I really don't like long seasons, like, at all. It just makes me want to end the season more and more, because more often than not, the cast I don't think is interesting enough to warrant a season of this length. And every time it gets pushed further than it really should, I think it messes with the pacing. That being said, there was at least one season that was the exception to this. I'm just gonna say that I'm so glad this season came after season 11 because season 12 just feels like a breath of fresh air. One thing that I'm immediately gonna praise season 12 for right off the bat is the fact that it makes the most out of its length, justifies it, and manages to avoid the urge of adding more episodes just for the sake of adding them. From the very start, it's got its entertainment value from the iconic first service, as well as the shenanigans with Mike and Nicole, as well as the return of Jason from season 9, and Rochelle proving herself to be an instant fan favorite. While it does kind of peter off later on in the season, this team switch is where things turn right back around. In particular, with one of the best storylines in the show's history in Scott the Scapegoat. He's constantly thrown under the bus by Joy and Anton for various reasons, and seeing him still be nice, especially towards Joy when she does nothing but try to screw him over, just makes him really likable. By the time Joy takes herself out one of the show's most shocking eliminations, the final four winds up being one of my favorites in the show's history, and I want them all to win equally. Scott for his underdog story, Jason for his comeback from season 9, Melanie, and Rochelle for just being super likable. Of course, Scott would wind up winning in one of the best finales in the show's history. Admittedly, there's a few reasons as to why it's not in the top 5. One of the reasons is because there is a pretty decent chunk of seasons where I think it drags a bit. Like, I think from placement 16 to 13, it does pick up a bit once we get to the Cook for Your Life challenge, which gives us a pretty memorable elimination of Jessica. Oh yeah, also, another gripe I have with this season is that it introduced elimination challenges. And sure, it's not as bad as it was in later seasons, but the challenge was still there. Finally, as much as I do think this season does use its episode count well, I still don't think I would go out of my way to sit down and watch it all just due to the length it takes. Thank God for the 18 episode format. But anyways, yeah, I really like this season. Strong drama, fun services, great moments, and one of my favorite ways to cap it all off. So, we're in the home stretch, the top 5 seasons. Not gonna lie, choosing the first 4 to make up the top 5 was a genuinely easy process, because I think they all have some pretty great highs in my opinion. That being said, choosing the final season to round the top 5 will primarily come down to nitpicks and really, which season would I rather sit down to watch. In the end, it came down to 2 seasons. After debating back and forth between this season and season 12, this one won out in the end. This might be one of my more controversial takes in this video, but I'm not gonna lie, I legitimately enjoy Season 3 a lot more than I really should. I mean, it's coming right off the awful Season 2, and upon first glance, you think that not much has changed. Watching it, however, and it's clear that out of the 3 seasons of 12-person casts, this one stands above the rest. Of course, the first thing I'm going to give praise to for this season is the cast itself. It's a surprisingly memorable cast in my opinion, and with the least interesting chef of the season in my mind is known for having a rare disease, that's really saying something. Additionally, the season features a lot more solidly structured narratives, with solid arcs that pay off pretty damn well in the end, such as Julia's journey from Waffle House chef to gaining Ramsey's respect, to Rock rising above the weak blue team and cementing himself as the one to beat. Even some of the questionable arcs like Houdini Josh ends with easily my favorite mid-service elimination, hell, probably one of the most historic eliminations of all time. Of course, my favorite part about the season is honestly the red team, which is rare considering that the red team usually devolves into infighting. But here, not only is the infighting much more engaging due to each team member having their own foil, but also the more unlikable chefs going earlier, leaving some actually likable chefs. Honestly, what's keeping this from getting higher is just the fact that there are better and more entertaining seasons out there. Overall, yeah, I actually really enjoyed this season. Sure, it may not be the most interesting season, but it's tight-knit, Ramsey is really starting to hit his groove here, and it's got a rock-solid winner. I'm sorry. You know, I actually had to really debate with myself if it was really worth getting through the rest of Palace Occasion after seasons 15 to 17 completely shit the bed. I mean, that's 3 seasons worth of awful chefs that I either didn't care much for, disliked heavily, or likable chefs that ended up being eliminated relatively early on or was screwed after a win. Things looked bleak. Until there was a bit of light. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit skeptical of this season the first time I laid my eyes on it. Admittedly, I had never considered the idea of rookies versus veterans at all, but I think that's because really the most experience I ever had when it came to returnee seasons was Total Drama All-Stars. Add on to the fact that the returning chef cast was one that I was very iffy about, and that left me with a season that I was a bit nervous to go into. However, I was pretty damn surprised by the season as a whole. The Veterans cast itself I found to be pretty memorable save for Roe, and with maybe the early picks like T and Kevin going out surprisingly early, that creates a lot of unpredictability on the Veterans side. And hey, the rookie side isn't half bad either. Scott's a funny first boot, Chris is sympathetic, Gizzy's got an honestly underrated elimination, Scotland's a dick that you want to see get eliminated as soon as possible, and the way he goes out is hilarious. Jose, okay, to be honest, he just exists. Keanu's fun, Mia's strong, and as much as I mixed on the way he went out, I like Mono decently enough. And then there's my 2 main highlights of the season. First is Ariel, who I was admittedly kind of mixed upon seeing return. I mean, she was fine in season 6, but I wouldn't be lying if I said she was probably one of the least interesting Black Jackets up to that point. She had her moment of being one of the few competent chefs on the red team, but really not much else. Here, she's loads better, emerges as a strong leader, and pretty much running away with the competition, one of the best payoffs in the show's history. And the other one is Trev. I hate him in Season 8 because of how whiny he was, but here, not only is he not whine as much, but he delivers some of the best confessionals in the whole show. Seriously, whenever he pops up doing his newscast, I just can't help but laugh, and it's clear that this season knows that he provides a lot of the entertainment. Not gonna lie, I think if he appeared in All-Stars, maybe replace either Josh or Giovanni, then I think I'd like this season just a little bit more. Outside of a few issues I had, like the abundant amount of focus on Mia to the extent I got sick of her, the random team switch back to Battle of the Sexes, which I thought made absolutely no sense whatsoever, and then finally getting rid of the iconic fire theme for the intro, this season was a pleasant surprise. Solid cast, fun memorable moments, and the fact this season feels like a better All-Star season than the actual All-Star season, plus this at number 4. Yeah, it was pretty much no question which seasons were easily going to make the top 3 upon finishing the rewatches. While at least one season is kinda iffy nowadays due to reasons I'll get into, really there's 2 seasons that I usually see people jump to when it comes to their favorite seasons. So why not start out with the season that I consider my top 3, but just not better than the other 2. Okay, so there's something kind of embarrassing I have to admit. For a while, Season 5 to me was kind of like my thoughts on Season 14. I can understand why people liked it, but I didn't think it was anything that special. Okay, it wasn't nearly as negative on Season 5 as Season 14, mostly because I could acknowledge Season 5 had great moments more easily, but considering this was wedged between 2 of my all-time favorite seasons, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. That's until I rewatched it again, and needless to say, I have a brand new appreciation for it. Season 5 is without doubt the most consistently entertaining season in the show's history. Yeah, you heard that right. I think that this season is just great to watch all the way through. From the very start, we get drama stars with Lacey, Seth, and once we get to the halfway point and the both of them are gone, then the drama really begins with Andrea and her constant lucky breaks. That's not to say it's all drama with chefs that are for the most part unlikable, because there are indeed bright spots. We do have the enemies to friends narrative with Ben and Danny, and of course we have Robert, who is probably the second funniest chef to step into the competition. I still think Tommy is funnier, but for a while Robert was the one who I thought was funnier. And then there's Danny and Paula as the files, which I would argue is the first time in the show's history that it felt like anyone's game. Of course, this season's also rife with iconic moments. We have your standard shocking moments from Seth's butchering of the meat to Jay and Lacey's injections back to back, no less. The Carol being the first chef to be eliminated from the winning team, the Andrew's crash and burn after winning immunity, to Giovanni's Final 6 performance. This season, in my opinion, has some of the most iconic services in the show's history. And then there's moments of the show that are actually quite emotional. From G's departure early on despite quickly establishing herself as a frontrunner, to Robert talking about his father before being forced to leave the competition eventually. The season does a phenomenal job hitting all these marks when it comes to drama that just isn't people arguing. However, why does the season lose out to the other two for me? Well, it's because while the season is consistently strong with drama, I have to admit I wasn't as invested as I could have been, and thus I don't think the drama hits the same heights as the other two. Maybe it's because for the most part I didn't really find that much to write home about the red team, and really the only blue team chefs that stuck out to me are Danny, Ben, and Robert. Giovanni also does to an extent, but it's mainly because of his file service. But you know what? It's still a great season. Sure, it may not speak to me as much as the top two, but I am truly sorry for how much I underrated this season. So, good job, Season 5. You did well. Well, here we are. Just 2 seasons to go, and with this means my hardest decision yet. Yeah, I admit, I had a lot of difficulty really deciding between these two for the top spot, because I feel that they both have their own share of positives. Sure, the season coming up I was about to put at the top because it's easily the season I was the most familiar with, and I didn't want to be predictable and put the season one would expect at the top. I mean, what kind of credibility would I have then as a guy who masquerades as an opossum who talks about Hell's Kitchen on the internet? However, really taking things into account and looking at each of the season's pros and cons, I realized that I couldn't, in good faith, choose this season over the obvious pick, despite the fact that I have more of an emotional attachment to it. So yeah, the number 2 spot goes to Season 4. I'll try to keep this brief because you already know why I like this season, but man, this season was a banger. Okay, sure, I can see why some people don't like this season with the amount of unlikable chefs in the cast like Jason, Ben, and Matt. And yeah, the cast is still really weak, and I know the winner herself is considered one of the weaker ones as well. But personally, I still enjoy it overall. Some of the more jerkish and obnoxious chefs go out much earlier, like Jason, and the far more likable chefs go much further. From Lou Ross, who's a ball of fun, to Petroza, who's absolutely wholesome 100, to Bobby, who had a generally great redemption from egotistical wannabe to strong chef, and to Christina, who has one of the best narratives in the show's history. Speaking of which, that's another big thing that I love about the season, just the whole storyline of Christina and Corey. And sure, there could be some people who say I'm looking way too far into it and that Corey didn't really have that big of a redemption, but you know what I still really enjoy it, his underrated as hell narrative. And last but certainly not least, I think that this season is truly where Gordon got his mojo. I mean, he has a lot of great quotes in this season. So many, in fact, that I think it's better that you take a look yourself. Just look at the first episode alone and you'll see what I mean. I guess outside the issue I have with Matt making it into the Black Jacket, seriously, how the fuck did he make it over Lou Ross? And the cast size being 15, which is terrible for my OCD, I legitimately love this season. Great cast, hilarious moments, and honestly underrated storyline. It's season 4, and I'm so glad I watched it. But of course, lost out to only one season. I've been talking about these seasons for about an hour or so at this point, or at least an hour by the time the parts finally get combined into one big video. If you're still here watching this, thank you. I know I haven't been the most consistent with uploading due to a lot of real life situations, but it really means a lot to me that you're still here. For that, I think I should explain just my mindset of a lot of these seasons. You see, when it comes to Hell's Kitchen, I found myself a lot more fascinated with the whole narrative aspect of it rather than the cooking aspect of it. And as such, I find myself judging many of the seasons based on how invested I was in the cast or the drama rather than the talent level. I know that sounds like an extremely flawed viewpoint, and trust me, it is. Even I can admit it. But as someone who really wants to go into production of sorts in the future, or at the very least wants to get into media, this is something I feel like I have to really pick at regardless of how it comes off as. And no other season ends up in my alley than the season that pretty much everyone loves, Season 6. Yeah, I didn't want to be predictable, but man, when people say the season is truly great, they mean it. Now, yes, there are things that are not great about the season. Like, there's definitely a few chefs who aren't really that memorable. There's that bike punishment, which even to this day I think is one of the most irresponsible punishments considering who was in it. And finally, the fact the season has a lot of behind the scenes stuff that shows how the season portrayed the chefs. Yeah, a lot of issues in the season, but it's far from off because everything else in this season makes up for it in spades. From that memorable first service that saw Louis' ejection, Melinda Wiston and Capellini, and get with Robert's return, to Tennille talking back to Ramsey, subsequently becoming one of the big picks to win the season right after, while also having a decent rivalry with Suzanne, to the band's general hilarity, the absolutely iconic final two of Kevin and Bo fucking Dave. There's just so much to enjoy about this season. And of course, how can I forget probably the most iconic moment in the show's history, that being the Joseph confrontation. Literally, you have to be living under a rock to not know about this. And if you don't know about it, just watch the season, you won't regret it. Season 6 reaches far bigger heights than any other season in the show's history. Iconic drama, iconic moments, iconic Ramsey outbursts, an iconic winner. It's the best season of Hell's Kitchen for me and many others. And that wraps up my 21 favorite seasons. Season 22 will get its own review eventually, but until then, this is EternalOpossum, and I'm signing off. Wait, shit. I forgot something. Obligatory over the head reference. Ah, nailed it.